Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? It's Monday, the 28th of December. December's almost over, and it's time for another edition of Mantra Monday. And we are covering the universal form. The universal form is the chapter where Krishna reveals to his friend and disciple, the Prince Arjuna, his cosmic form. And this chapter is all about establishing Krishna's divinity, unparalleled divinity. So, I'm reading several verses at a time because the nature of this chapter just lends itself to that. So today we're going to be covering verses 8, 9, and 10 and 11. 10 and 11 are, it's kind of a hybrid verse. It's been put together. Let me just close the door here. Okay, Noah? Fans want to say hello to you. Good morning, everybody. All right, so I'm going to put him on his little blankie here. Okay, buddy, you stay here. You stay here. He likes to come in and check on me. All right, so let's get into it. I hope that you all had a good weekend. I spent the weekend looking at a lot of Christmas lights, and it was actually really, really nice. A lot of Christmas trees that were alive and decorated. Okay, so remember in the text 7, Arjuna is about to do the big reveal. So he said, "O Arjuna, whatever you wish to see, behold at once in this body of mine. This universal form can show you whatever you now desire to see, and whatever you may want to see in the future. Everything moving and non-moving is here, completely and in one place." Excuse me. Okay. We had a big storm here last night, and the temperature has dropped considerably. So I'm feeling a little sniffly for that. Okay. So that's what he said previously. So now, the Sanskrit. Natumam śakyase draṣṭum. Anenaiva sva-cakṣuṣā, divyaṁ dadāmi te cakṣuḥ, paśya me yogam aiśvaram. Word for word translation of text 8. Na, never, tu, but, mam, me, śakyase, are able, draṣṭum, to see, anena, with these, eva, certainly, sva-cakṣuṣā, your own eyes, divyaṁ, divine, dadāmi, I give, te, to you, cakṣuḥ, eyes, paśya, see, me, my, yogam, aiśvaram, inconceivable mystic power. But you cannot see me with your present eyes, therefore I give you divine eyes. Behold my mystic opulence. Purport. A pure devotee does not like to see Krishna in any form except his form with two hands. The devotee must see his universal form by his grace, not with the mind, but with spiritual eyes. To see the universal form of Krishna, Arjuna is told not to change his mind, but his vision. The universal form of Krishna is not very important. That will be clear in subsequent verses. Yet because Arjuna wanted to see it, the Lord gives him the particular vision required to see that universal form. Okay, I want to stop here because there's a thought that is coming to mind. But first, I think I better get that box of Kleenex. I'll be right back. Stay. Hey, buddy. I apologize for these annoying interruptions. Okay, so this is so here it says, yet because Arjuna wanted to see it, the Lord gives him the particular vision required to see that universal form. So this reminds me of the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj. Actually, Dhruva, when he was still just a little boy, he was about 5 or 6 years old, maybe a little bit older than that. And he had gone to the forest because he wanted to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Remember, he was very upset and very angry that he was not allowed to sit on the lap of his father, the king, because his mother, who was the co-wife, was not the favored queen. And the favored queen was cruel. And so once Dhruva had come to the point of his austerities, that the Lord was pleased with him, that Narayan was pleased with him, he appeared before him. And of course, this is just a child, and although articulate in many ways, he was dumbstruck when he saw Lord Vishnu standing in front of him and was speechless, really wanted to say things and wanted to offer prayers, but was just unable to. And so the Lord actually touched Dhruva on his head, with his conch shell, and gave him the ability to speak, gave him the ability to offer prayers. So I think that this is really instructive, right? There's so many things that we want to be able to do, but that are really beyond our capacity as a human being. Often we just find ourselves in these situations where we really feel like we're in over our head. So what to speak of trying to see the universal form, literally trying to see everything manifested, moving and non-moving in the entire universe all at the same time. So this is why it is explained that the Lord gave Arjuna the ability, it says it gave him the particular vision required to see that universal form. So I just wanted to make note of that, because that's important. Okay, then Prabhupada goes on to say, devotees who are correctly situated in a transcendental relationship with Krishna are attracted by loving features, not by a godless display of opulence, of opulences. Of course, I suppose this is a godly display of opulences when you think about it. They are so immersed in pure love that they do not even know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In their loving exchange, they forget that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that the boys who play with Krishna are all highly pious souls, and after many, many births, they are able to play with Krishna. Such boys do not know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They take him as a personal friend. Therefore, Sukadeva Goswami recites this verse, Itam shatam brahma sukhanubhutya dasyam gatanam para devatena maya shritanam nara darakena shakam vijaru krita punya punjaha. So he's observing. Here is a supreme person who was considered the impersonal Brahman by great sages, the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotees, and a product of material nature by ordinary men. Now these boys, who have performed many, many pious activities in their past lives, are playing with that Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is an excerpt from the Srimad Bhagavatam 10, 12, 11, Canto 10, Chapter 12, Verse 11. The fact is that the devotee is not concerned with seeing the Vishvarupa, the universal form, but Arjuna wanted to see it to substantiate Krishna's statement, so that in the future people could understand that Krishna not only theoretically or philosophically presented himself as a supreme, but actually presented himself as such to Arjuna. Arjuna must confirm this because Arjuna is the beginning of the parampara system. those who are actually interested in understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna and who follow in the footsteps of Arjuna should understand that Krishna not only theoretically presented himself as the Supreme, but actually revealed himself as the Supreme. The Lord gave Arjuna the necessary power to see his universal form because he knew that Arjuna did not particularly want to see it, as we have already explained. So, such are the intricacies and the complexities of loving exchanges between the Lord and his devotees. So there are some other very good points that are made here. Sukadeva Goswami is breaking down the perspective that different persons have depending on where they're at spiritually. So it says, the impersonalists, these are the Mayavadis. These are people that can only accept and can only perceive God as just being an impersonal white light, right? These are the people that feel that, we are nothing and that we merge into the great nothingness. So, then it goes on to say, but the devotees, the bhaktas, considered Krishna to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we have already established in the Bhagavad Gita, how that is and why that is so. We've already talked about Krishna and Goloka Vrindavan, how Krishna expands himself into his different Vishnu expansions in order to be able to create the universe, in order to be able to maintain the universe, in order to be able to accompany us and be a witness to all the things that we do. And then we've talked about the different responsibilities by his son, by Brahma, right? Brahma is the first created living being in this material universe who has a responsibility of creation, of populating the universe. And then, of course, we have Lord Shiva, who is responsible for the destruction and the annihilation of the material universe when the living entities recede or go back into the body of the Supreme Lord and go into a kind of a sleep until the next cycle expands. And then in the 10th chapter, there was a lot of detail about all the different aspects of the Lord and how he manifests himself in this incredible bio machine that we are living in and that we are inhabiting. So all these things have been established. So then it says that Krishna is considered to be a product of material nature by ordinary men, right? So there are people that see Krishna and just think, he's just an ordinary guy. Maybe more good looking, maybe more opulence at his disposal, maybe more fans, maybe more women around him, but he's just an ordinary living entity. And but then it winds up by saying, now these boys, the cowherd boys or the gopas, the souls, the jivas, the mahajans, who Krishna spends his time with every day, all day when they take the cows out to pasture. They are the people that he has adventures with, that he eats his lunch with, that he plays with, and that he executes these childhood responsibilities of taking care of the cows, as Govinda. They get to play with him, and as far as they're concerned, he's their good buddy. They're not thinking all day long about Krishna's position and all of that. So this is because the devotee or the bhakta prefers this form of the Lord because it facilitates love. It facilitates interaction. Very personal, loving interaction. Because what Arjuna is about to see here on the battlefield is cause for a major freak out. It is overwhelming. When we feel overwhelmed, it inhibits our ability to act, right? And the devotee is only interested in acting on the behalf of the Supreme Lord. So, nevertheless, that's why this form is being displayed, in order to establish this reality. And then it goes on here to say, Arjuna must confirm, because Arjuna is the beginning of the parampara system. So what's the parampara system? Parampara is the dislipic succession. This is the system that has been established in Vedic culture of teaching, of learning and teaching, learning and teaching. And so that means that knowledge, that spiritual knowledge, is passed down from teacher to student, who then becomes a teacher, who passes down to a student, who becomes a teacher, who passes down to a student, and so on and so forth. And this has gone on since time immemorial. Now we remember at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna says to Krishna, well, how can you be, the supreme spiritual master? I mean, how could you have instructed Ishvaku? How could you have instructed the sun god? How did that happen? Because you're younger than they are. Well, that's another feature of Krishna's opulence, is that he always appears eternally youthful. He never appears any older than a youth of 16 years old, because his body is completely spiritual and completely transcendental. So, Krishna replies to Arjuna, many, many births, you and I have seen, but the difference between you and me is I remember all of them. I remember everything. And my body does not undergo birth, death, disease, and old age. I am not subject to forgetfulness. Krishna is not going through the trauma of death and then birth. Death and birth. Death can be very traumatic. And birth can also be very traumatic. Especially for the human being. There you are, cramped up in a little room for 10 months at a time, and then you are squeezed out of a little passage. Your head, is crushed. And well, fortunately, babies have that physiology that their bones and their head are very supple. But still, this isn't a very pleasant situation, to have to go through. It's difficult. So all these different things are kind of built into the cycle of birth and death, just to allow us to be able to live, to be able to go through our lives. Because really, if we had to remember all of our past lives, and what we had to do to get in and out of each one, we'd be completely overwhelmed. So this is a kind of a covering over, or to spare us this memory of this kind of repeated trauma over and over again. But Krishna doesn't undergo that kind of trauma. If he wants to have another kind of experience, he simply expands himself and has that experience. Okay, I'm not going to go too much. I'm not going to go into the scheduled incarnations. I'm not going to do that right now. But suffice it to say that is something that is very, very easy for him to do. So the parampara system is being established here through the agency of Arjuna, by those who are actually interested in understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, okay, and who follow in the footsteps of Arjuna. So there is a process here. The whole Bhagavad Gita is really outlining a process and outlining the science of devotional service, but once again, also displaying through the person of Arjuna the different phases that we can go through, that we do go through as a living being, and hopefully up to the point where we can begin to walk that path towards our ultimate enlightenment and understand Bhagavan fully and our relationship to Bhagavan and our relationship to everyone else and everything else. All right, so let's move on to text 9. Sañjaya uvāca evam uktvā tato rājan mahā-yogeśvaro hariḥ darśayām pārthāya paramam rūpam aiśvaram. Translation word for word. Sañjaya uvāca, Sañjaya said, evam, thus, uktvā, saying, tataha, thereafter, rājan, O king, mahā-yogeśvaro, the most powerful mystic, hariḥ, the supreme personality of Godhead, Krishna, darśayām, showed, pārthāya, unto Arjuna, paramam, the divine, rūpam, aiśvaram, universal form. Sañjaya said, O king, having spoken thus, the supreme lord of all mystic power, the personality of Godhead, displayed his universal form to Arjuna. So this is a good time to make mention of who Sañjaya is. Sañjaya was the secretary to King Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra is the father of Dronacharya. He is the husband of Gandhari. He is the king or the head of the Kuru dynasty. That means that he is actually the uncle. My understanding is, I believe that he is actually the uncle of Arjuna, but he is on the opposing side. So his son, and actually all of his sons, because Gandhari had a lot of sons, they are all fighting against Arjuna and his brothers Yudhisthira, Bhima, Sakula, Nahadev, and of course, Krishna on the other side. So Dhritarashtra also happened to be blind. It's said that Dhritarashtra was not only spiritually blind, but that he was actually also materially blind. He couldn't see. So he is asking, because he's not able to go to the battlefield. He's not in the shape to be able to do that. So he is actually sitting in his throne room, and he is getting a blow-by-blow breakdown by his minister Sañjaya, who has the gift of sight, who has the gift of being able to actually see what is going on in the battlefield while being in the throne room. I think psychics today, or people today, would call that remote viewing. He has the ability to be able to do that. And so periodically throughout the Bhagavad Gita, a couple of times, Sañjaya makes an appearance like this because Dhritarashtra was very anxious to know what was going on in the battlefield, and how his sons and everything were doing, because of course the battle for a kingdom is at stake here. So that's far out. Let me see if I can actually find you a painting of Sañjaya. Here we go. This is beautiful. So this is a beautiful painting. There is Sañjaya seated, and there is Maharaj Dhritarashtra on his throne. And you can see that due to his powers, due to his mystic powers, his ability to concentrate, Sañjaya is able to see Krishna and Arjuna on the chariot above and listen in on the conversation and understand what is going on. Okay, moving on to the last two verses we're going to cover this morning. This is text 10 and 11, Sanskrit. Aneka-vaktra-nayanam, aneka-bhuta-darśanam, aneka-divyābharaṇaṁ, divya-gandhānulepanam. Okay, I'm going to try and sing that. Aneka-vaktra-nayanam, aneka-bhuta-darśanam, aneka-divyābharaṇaṁ, divya-gandhānulepanam. Then the second part of the verse, or verse 11, divya-mālyāmbara-dharaṁ, divya-gandhānulepanam, sarvāścarya-mayaṁ divam, anantam viśvato-mukham, divya-mālyāmbara-dharaṁ, divya-gandhānulepanam, sarvāścarya-mayaṁ devam, anantam viśvato-mukham. Word for word translation. Aneka, various, vatra, mouths, nayanam, eyes, aneka, various, adbhuta, wonderful, darśanam, sights, aneka, many, divya, divine, abharaṇaṁ, ornaments, divya, divine, aneka, various, udyata, uplifted, ayudham, weapons, divya, divine, malya, garlands, ambara, dresses, daram, wearing, divya, divine, gandha, fragrances, anulepanam, smeared with, sarva, all, aścarya-mayaṁ, wonderful, devam, shining, anantam, unlimited, viśvato-mukham, all-pervading. Translation. Arjuna saw in that universal form unlimited mouths, unlimited eyes, unlimited wonderful visions. The form was decorated with many celestial ornaments and bore many divine upraised weapons. He wore celestial garlands and garments, and many divine scents were smeared over his body. All was wondrous, brilliant, unlimited, all expanding. Purport. In these two verses, the repeated use of the word many indicates that there was no limit to the number of hands, mouths, legs, and other manifestations Arjuna was seeing. These manifestations were distributed throughout the universe, but by the grace of the Lord, Arjuna could see them while sitting in one place. That was due to the inconceivable potency of Krishna. So yes, so the word aneka is used many times. It's used 1, 2, 3. Let me see, where else? 4. It's used 4 times in the verse. Various. The word various is used many times. And it's used either as the word various or it's used as the word many. That is the rough translation. So there you have it. Now Arjuna, is beginning to get a peek at this universal form. And when we come back to this next week, which will be the new year, wow, yeah, then we'll start to get into a little bit more detail into what it was like for Krishna to witness this and what his reaction was to seeing all these different things. Chapter 11, let me see. It's actually a fairly lengthy chapter. There's actually 55 texts in this chapter. Yeah. So we're really going to be taken through the journey here of what this all means, who Krishna is, and in this kind of divine and sort of horrible form of his. And then, in conclusion, talk about, really what is the better way, what is the easier way to actually approach the Supreme Lord. So that's what's up. Thank you very much for being here with me this morning. I appreciate it. I have posted the verses inside the event, but I'll try and post them here on the page as well, so you can, take a look at that and study that as well. All right. I'll be over on Instagram at about 9:35 a.m. Peace.